Hello again, this is Preheat. Welcome back to another World of Warcraft video. And boy, oh boy, do we have a lot to cover today. So we're just going to jump right into it. So we have some massive news. Blizzard just dropped a bombshell on Arcane. We also have some minor changes for Frost and Fire to cover here, but this is going to have far-reaching implications on the rotations that we've covered in our previous videos. You can see both of those here. Yeah, so let's talk about what's actually changing. So obviously, there's a lot in here. I'm not going to cover every single class, but I am going to cover what I think you, as one of my viewers or subscribers, is probably interested in hearing. So very, very briefly, they have buff skill commanders, so now you actually get a 40% DR on Obsidian skills. So this is kind of insane, because that's a 40% DR with 2 charges. Yeah, really, really strong, especially for Aug. Also, Augmentation got nerfed. It doesn't matter. It's still S tier. This is a pretty substantial nerf to Ebon Might in Raid. Also, we are getting closest clutch mates just completely removed, so that's a 10% on top of that. So if you add this all together, it's like a 20% nerf to Ebon Might, and then another 10% nerf to Ebon Might Mythic Plus. But guess what? It doesn't matter. Aug is still S tier because it still just does way too much damage, and it's not even really about the damage. It's about the damage reduction. So, keep nerfing the damage all you want, Blizzard. You're not really affecting the thing that's going to make it so it's not meta anymore in Mythic Plus. Since Mythic Plus is about survival, it doesn't really matter. And damage, honestly, is so insanely high right now that, nerfing the crap out of the damage, you're just bringing it in line with the other classes. So if anything, this is just taking Aug from being out in the stratosphere and Mythic Plus just being insanely overpowered to the point where you could bring 2 of them in a group and maybe only 1 normal DPS. And now, that's going to actually cost you quite a bit because you will need 2 other DPS to buff. So, anyways, that's my take on the Aug thing. Still S tier, doesn't matter, doesn't change anything. Moving on to the mage stuff. Okay, so number 1, Living Bomb buff. Okay, so this is important to note. Living Bomb was buffed for Frost, or at least in theory it was. However, there are other things in the spell data that just don't really add up. So essentially what's happened here is they've made Living Bomb do more damage for Frost specifically, but there was also other changes that I'm not going to get into, but basically Living Bomb is still terrible for Frostfire. This doesn't really change anything. If you do a 10 target sim as Frostfire with the new spell data, Living Bomb is still only doing 0.6% of your damage. Okay, so this does not matter. It doesn't change anything. Living Bomb is still terrible for Frostfire. Frostfire is still abysmally bad when it comes to single target, and this is not going to change it. They would need to give this the Warlock treatment, give it like a 850% buff or something for this to actually matter. So moving on. We have some buffs here. We have some other buffs. All of this isn't really too important. All of this stuff doesn't really matter too much. It's all very minimal. But the change here that actually has like a crazy impact, and this is going to basically invalidate every Arcane guide I've put out, is this change right here. Fixed an issue that was allowing the last second Nether Precision to be double dipped by spell queuing. So the way that they're framing this is as if they're fixing a bug, okay? But the problem with that idea is that this is not an exception, okay? Nether Precision working whenever you use 2 spells at the end of it is not an exception. It's more the rule. Spells that don't work this way are the exception. Okay, so for those of you who don't really have the background to understand how spell queuing works, I'm just going to give you an example to hopefully clear this up. So imagine that this red bar at the top is a cast. So in the case of a cast, the action takes place at the end, and the delay is at the start, right? That's how cast spells work. And then on the GCD, like an instant cast, the action actually takes place at the start, and then the delay happens at the end. So what happens is if you queue up an instant cast spell at the end of your cast spell, what's going to end up happening is the action actually overlaps here. So you actually end up in a situation where these things are actually happening at the same time. So what's going to end up happening is basically because this is happening like at the same time in terms of where the server is having it happen, since it's queued exactly at the same timestamp, what spells are going to do is they are going to look at the point at which the spell has been cast generally. Now, there are exceptions to this. Obviously, Frost Mage has basically every spell doesn't work this way because, it's designed around shattering. So it's a completely different thing. Frost is kind of like its own weird cook, right? Like no other spells really have that same weirdness to them if you look across other classes. So, forgetting about Frost for a second, there are some fire spells that also don't work this way. So the way that Phoenix Flame works is it basically is a 2-spell thing. There's 2 spells that happen. Whenever you do a Phoenix Flame, the first spell, the actual animation for the Phoenix Flame, that doesn't do anything, actually. Okay, the only thing that spell does is just shows an animation. Once it makes impact, what it does is it scripts to call another spell which is Phoenix Flame Splash, which is the spell that actually deals damage. So the way that Phoenix Flame works basically is you do a dummy spell that does nothing. Once it makes impact, it calls another spell that activates. And that's why Phoenix Flame actually activates on impact as opposed to on cast. So that one's the exception for Fire Mage. There are other examples, like weird ones, like Meteor, for instance, doesn't work until the object actually spawns in the air. So like if you press Meteor, it doesn't check for your buffs or anything until the actual giant ball in the sky like spawns in. And then that's when it calculates what it has in terms of its buffs. And then once it falls, it just deals with every damage it was pre-designed to do. But in the case of the overwhelming majority of spells, we're talking like hundreds of spells in this game that work this way. It literally has this same logic. If you queue a spell from a cast, is going to look at when you cast complete, okay? Even for Devastation Evoker, you can look at Shattering Star, for instance. And with Shattering Star, if I apply Shattering Star to the enemy, okay, and then I queue up a Eternity Surge and I have it go off right as Shattering Star is ending, as long as the cast completes with Shattering Star still on the target, even if that debuff is not still on the target, it will still do full damage. All right, so I want to get that clear because I've seen a lot of people talking about this change and saying, well, it makes sense because, you know, it was never supposed to work that way in the first place. Well, number one, that's not really true. That's really how most spells work, right? If you understand spell queuing, you understand that this is just like the norm in this game, right? Spell queuing just works this way. And number two, honestly, that doesn't really matter because what matters is the implication of this change, the bottom line. What actually occurs if you make Nether Precision no longer work with Arcane Barrage and Arcane Blast at the same time? Well, the answer is you just stop pressing Brush. That's the answer. If you were to make Nether Precision 3 buffs, it wouldn't matter. Okay, it wouldn't matter because the only reason why this was a thing that we did as Arcane is because we were able to get the free Arcane Barrage, the free one, at the end of the cast. In the sim, if you don't have Nether Precision on your Arcane Barrage, you basically never press the button. All right, there's still going to be cases where you press it because maybe you get like a free return on it with some Fury. Maybe there's some other reason. Maybe you're just AoEing, right? There's going to be other reasons why you'll still Arcane Barrage. But generally speaking, if we're looking at the Arcane rotation, what this change does is it basically takes everything that you enjoy about Arcane, the whole new play style with high voltage and constantly barraging. I'm not talking about barrages at 0 charges. I'm talking like juiced up barrages, right? It takes all of that, everything that they've cooked for the new rotation to change Arcane to be the way that it is that you've been enjoying the Spellslinger, and that all just goes away, all right? So talents like high voltage, gone. It doesn't matter. That talent's useless now, right? Why would we ever use high voltage when we have to use the Arcane Missiles and we're not going to end up at 4 charges? We're going to be below 4 charges, so we would not send a Barrage. So this talent's effectively dead now. Also, other talents that affect Arcane Barrage, like Orb Barrage, you would still probably play this in AoE, but this talent is also probably effectively dead. Arcane Bombardment still may have some use, but obviously it takes a big hit here. But the bottom line is just that this is a really, really bad change, and if you enjoy Arcane and you don't want to just be spamming Arcane Blast, then you should be asking Blizzard to revert this change. I'm going to link the feedback forum in the description below. Obviously, be constructive, okay? If you're going to give feedback, it's always best to be constructive and cordial because that will get your feedback noticed a little bit more. But you will notice that the Arcane feedback thread, if you follow this kind of thing, but you'll notice if you follow this sort of thing that the Arcane feedback thread has completely ballooned in the past couple days. Ever since they announced this change, I swear there's been like 300 new posts on there. It's more active than it's been the entire beta cycle, and almost every single message is referencing this change. All of the experts agree, myself included. This is a terrible change, and if they want Arcane to be a spec that people actually enjoy playing in the War Within, they need to revert this change immediately. Okay, it does not work if you do this. And I know that whoever made this change probably doesn't have the full idea, the full implications of what they're doing, but we need to make sure that they understand that this is just really, really bad for Arcane. Okay, and it's fine. I mean, we can play Frost and Fire, whatever, but I was actually looking forward to playing Arcane. I don't know about you, and this change just kind of kills it, right? Because, I mean, Spellslinger, you're just never going to barrage. You basically are just a turret. You're glued to the ground, which is kind of funny because Spellslinger is supposed to be a slinger of spells, you know, constantly throwing them out. But yeah, essentially what happens here is you completely change the talent build. You no longer play the talents that would allow you any sort of movement. You're just Arcane Blast spamming. Very bad change. Hopefully, if there's something else you get from this video, just know that this is really, really bad. And yeah, this change must be reverted unless Arcane is just doomed to being basically a watered down version of what it was in BFA and other expansions where it just Arcane Blast spammed. Moving on. We also have these changes to Living Bomb. Now, a lot of people have been reaching out to me saying that this blindsided them and they're seeing this as like a a really, really bad change for fire, and you're not wrong about that. But one thing I do want to point out is that this is not a new change. So if we look at 6 days ago, this was actually implemented already. All right, the change to Living Bomb has already happened. It has been on the beta for a while. We've actually been testing it for over a week, and this isn't, I mean, it's not terrible. It doesn't really destroy fire in any way. All it does is just kind of kill off the Living Bomb talents. For Sun Fury, it's still going to be really good. For Frostfire, just because you get so many free Living Bombs, it doesn't matter, right? So if they're decreasing the chance it procs, it's like, okay, well, cool. I have a guaranteed proc with my excess heat, so who cares? But the damage is also down, obviously, and Living Bomb just across the board is down. It's useless for Frost. For Fire, it's pretty bad now. So I would like to see them maybe buff Living Bomb just a little bit. I know they got to be really careful with Living Bomb, because if they buff it even just a little bit, it can get out of control real quick. But obviously, they need to look at the tuning on Living Bomb and figure out if they actually want these talents to be competitive. Because if they don't, then I guess just keep it the way it is. And if you do want them to be competitive, then probably look at maybe buffing Living Bomb just a little bit. We also got a Scorch buff. So the only thing that actually changed for Fire in this patch is that you got a Scorch buff. This is a 25% buff on a coefficient that's already so bad. This barely changes anything unless you were already going Scorch. So for Sun Fury, you would already play Scorch and maybe some of the Scorch talents, since you're now avoiding Living Bomb. So I guess in that case, you know, maybe there's something there. But the coefficient on Scorch is only 24.4%. It's a very, very small coefficient. So increasing that by 25%, you're just bringing it up to 30. It's still a spell that basically does no damage. And yes, you can take talents to buff it. Obviously, they buffed Improved Scorch as well. But it doesn't really matter. It's just kind of mid. And you can actually just forego Scorch talents completely and just run the base Scorch just for the hot streaks and basically have the same result without having to maintain a buff. So and if they want the Scorch to be good, I don't think nerfing Living Bomb is the way to do it. I think you just need to actually give Scorch like a real damage modifier, because as it stands right now, if you're playing Scorch, you have to pick up 3 separate talents for this thing. And it's just really kind of not worth it unless you're playing Sun Fury. I mean, in the case of Sun Fury, you can easily pick up Heat Simmer and, you know, improve Scorch here or Scald, and then you can have something working. But the problem is that Scorch itself, like on its own, unless you pick up this talent over here that increases its damage or gives it a debuff, it is just a hot streak generator, right? So increasing the damage doesn't really change anything. It is good to tune it. I'm glad that they're looking into it, but it's going to need more love. And moving on, we have the Death's Chill change for Frost, and this is also a pretty big change, but it actually doesn't have too big of an impact on Frost, because these talents already weren't too good to begin with. They were kind of worth it if you played around it. I know a lot of people didn't like the Frostbolt stuff, but essentially what they've done is they've made it so that this talent would now be effectively dead for Spellslinger. Obviously, it's still useful for Frostfire, but the problem with Frostfire is that Frostfire doesn't have any sort of single target damage. It's missing like 10% damage. It's just tuned very low, so there's really no reason to play Frostfire. So the only case where you would actually use this is kind of dead already. Obviously, they also buffed Ray of Frost 2, which is great. That means in single target, you can actually use this ability. But unfortunately, it's still kind of not worth it in most cases. So this is going to be your new Frost build for Mythic Plus. This is actually already in my Frost video. I provided 2 different examples of builds because I kind of anticipated something might change with Death's Chill. I wasn't expecting it to get nerfed. I was actually expecting it to get buffed, but here we are. But anyways, this is the new talent build you will run. So you just pick up Chain Reaction. This talent is absolutely juiced for Spellslinger. So we're getting like a really good alternative here. And you would obviously pick up Winter's Tide. Make sure you have those. And you need Splintering Cold to get to Chain Reaction. We just dropped Fractured Frost and Death's Chill completely. So no big deal there. But this is going to basically do about 3% less AoE. And it's going to do about 3% more single target. So it's a net neutral change. It doesn't really change anything. The playstyle itself just gets easier because now you don't really have to worry about casting Frostbolts at the start of your Icy Veins. So honestly, it's just getting better to play. It just means that you have more dead talents now. Now, if you're going for single target, then obviously you don't need like this Blizzard talent. You don't need Freezing Rain. You don't need Coldest Snap. You can go over here and pick up Cold Front, and then you can pick up Ray of Frost. The only issue is that this change to Ray of Frost doesn't actually add up, like math-wise. They said they increased it by 20%. Unfortunately, they didn't actually do that. It's not actually 20% increase. It's only about half of that, so you only got like about 10% more. So I don't even know if I would actually go Ray of Frost like at all. I think I would almost prefer to just go more of a cleave build. You can pick up Ray of Frost and Cryopathy here, and that is going to give you some damage, but just know that if you're playing Ray of Frost, you never would press this in your Icy Veins. So it's going to be kind of weird, right? Because whenever you have Cryopathy, it makes it so that popping Icy Veins instantly gives you max stacks of Ray of Frost. You would expect that you want to press this right away. Unfortunately, because Spellslinger gives Winter's Chill, it's actually not worth it to ever Ray of Frost in Icy Veins. So if you decide to go this route for whatever reason, Just know that if you go Ray of Frost, you are basically only pressing it outside of your Icy Veins, okay? So we would never press Ray of Frost during Icy Veins because we are permanently getting Winter's Chill. We get our Winter's Chill from using every Flurry, and that's going to proc back on the target. So honestly, I don't even know if I would recommend playing Ray of Frost like at all. I think I would actually prefer to maybe go into more cleave talents. Maybe instead I would just pick up over here Ice Collar to get the time on Blizzard up there, and maybe pick up Freezing Rain too. And now I'm getting more blizzards and more frozen orbs, something like this. You can also pick up Cold Front. Cold Front is a pretty decent talent in single target. It's like a 2.9%, but unfortunately you have to pick up Fracture Frost to get to it, so it kind of ends up being not so worth it. So, I mean, yeah, you can play around with this however you want, but I think really the cook here is if there's any sort of AoE that happens like in the fight at all, I would just go this build right here where you've got Coldest Snap. It definitely has uses if ads just spawn very briefly because, again, you don't need the ads to be up the whole fight. You just need them to be up like every 45 seconds, and you're going to get pretty good value out of this. You're getting a lot more returns on your blizzards and your frozen orbs here because you're constantly casting those. It's instant cast. You're getting CDR on your orbs. You're getting more ice lances from your orbs. So to me, this is just a cook. Just know if you are going single target, though, you can pick up Ray of Frost and Cryopathy, but again, it's something that you would never press in Icy Veins, so it's going to be really awkward to play for Spellslinger. So that is the Frost change. Overall, this patch has kind of dropped a lot of stinkers for us as mages, honestly. All of the other changes here in terms of like the impact compared to this one are nothing, okay? It is all the Nether Precision. This should be our focus, is trying to get this reverted if we want Arcane to be fun. That's really the bottom line, is this talent just makes it so it's not fun, so that you're just spamming Arcane Blast. So that's going to be your update. I don't really have like a new Arcane rotation to share with you yet. I think we're going to be playing Sun Fury. I think Spellslinger is just effectively dead. So keep your eyes peeled for more Arcane information. I'm going to have to put out a new video on that. For Frost, though, the same video still stands. You just basically play... Chain Reaction. You just don't go Death's Chill. Everything else still stands. It's all the same. And this is all just on the beta, just to be clear, right? This is not pre-patch stuff. So just be aware, this isn't actually changing on live. You can continue playing the way that you've always played. It's just, if you log into the beta, just know that these are changes that you need to be aware of. So that's going to be it for today. Unfortunately, I am having to be the bearer of bad news, but hopefully there'll be another update and I'll be able to tell you we succeeded in getting Nether Precision unnerfed. But if you like this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up. And if you want to see more of my content, be sure to subscribe to the channel and ring that notification bell. And hopefully I'll see you in the next one.